Good morning, I'm the 100 Proof News Hound, here with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. On this episode, we're going all the way back 100 years to June of 1925. So everything that we've got here today is a June 1925 story, and it's all contained in our big book of knowledge here. Now, I want you all to like and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to build it, and we really need those subscriptions. Don't worry, the subscription just tells you when we've dropped a new episode, and you wouldn't want to miss that. All right. Now, this week, we got a variety, a potpourri of topics here. We're going to drop in on the Marx Brothers for a little of their insanity. That'll include sort of a referential trip to Florida to check in how the housing bubble's doing in Florida in 1925. We're going to have some horrible climate apocalypse news. It's going to be extremely hot in the north. There's going to be floods in Texas and Mexico, killing 100 people. We're gonna visit with Charles Lindbergh and see what he was doing in 1925, as well as stop, strangely, by the American Civil Liberties Union. The Scopes Monkey trial is beginning in June of 1925, and we're going to briefly visit with them. We're going to talk some blimps, and we're also going to talk some color TV. So let's get started. Where we're going to get started, though, is with baseball. It's specifically, we're going to examine and debunk one of the great foundational myths of baseball, the Wally Pipp story. Wally Pipp was the first baseman of the New York Yankees, and a pretty good first baseman he was in the 1920s. He hit 280, 290, 15 triples. Really good, solid player. Not a superstar, but a good, solid player. The myth is that he woke up one day with a headache in June of 1925, and he went to the manager, Miller Huggins, and asked for the day off. And that day off turned into 2,130 consecutive days off because he was replaced by Lou Gehrig, who never missed a game for the next 13 years. That's wrong. That myth is absolutely fundamentally wrong. I've checked the box scores, I've checked the newspapers, and here's what really happened. Wally Pipp was a 280, 290 hitter and got off in 1925 to a really good start. Come May 15th, he's hitting 312, he's doing great. But then he goes into a slump, and for the next 3 weeks, he bats about 100, and his batting average is lowered to 240. Miller Huggins figures, I got to do something to shake up the team. Babe Ruth was just coming back from his stomach surgery, and he was going to appear in his first game in June 2nd. Huggins thought that'd be a good time to make some changes. So here we have, from the Buffalo News, June 2nd, 1925. Rookies replace Yanks veterans. Pipp, Ward, and Shang taken out of lineup. A radical shakeup in the lineup of the New York Yankees was made by manager Miller Huggins for the game with Washington today, when 3 first-string veterans were benched to make room for 3 rookies. Wally Pipp, lanky first baseman, was replaced by Lou Gehrig. And that's what happened. There isn't any headache. Wally Pipp is being replaced because he's in a slump, and he's being replaced by a much better player. Lou Gehrig, of course, would go on to end up in the Hall of Fame, and more importantly, he was a tremendous human being, and unfortunately died of ALS, the disease that now carries his name. But the myth is wrong. The real story's pretty good, but the myth is wrong, and there was no headache, and Wally Pipp didn't ask to be replaced. That brings us to the Marx Brothers. I told you we're going to deal with some Marx Brothers insanity, and this is about as insane as it gets for the Marx Brothers. Give you a little bit of background on the Marx Brothers, because most people just know the Marx Brothers from their movies. But for 15 years before they made their first movie, they were a vaudeville act. They toured the country in a musical comedy sketch kind of thing, performing around the country on the biggest circuit. They were big stars. They were so big that there was some demand to have them perform in Britain. And they went over to England in 1923. However, their employment contract with the major vaudeville houses said that they needed to get permission to perform for other promoters, and they didn't get permission prior to going to England, and they were suspended. That caused them to have to go to a secondary distributor, the Schubert Company, and they were forced to tour smaller theaters and for lesser money. The career was sort of stalled. Somebody, though, had the great idea, why not, instead of performing just vaudeville stuff, why not do an actual musical comedy? Why not have something written for them? And they did. And the play that actually saved the Marx Brothers and kept them together was a little number called I'll Say She Is. Was never made into a movie like some of their other plays were, but I'll Say She Is was a hit. It ran in New York City for a solid year, then went to Chicago, where it ran for 17 weeks at the Apollo Theater, and then it played in Detroit. And it's in Detroit where the strangeness occurs. Here we have the Detroit Free Press of June 2nd, 1925. It's an ad from the Schubert Detroit Opera House Theater. Now, that's a big, it's 3,000 seats. It's been remodeled, now seats about 2,700. It's a big venue, and they're going to play there. Now, here's an interesting thing here. What did it cost to go see a show at that time? Matinees were $50 cents to $2. So that's anywhere between $15 and $60. So those are the range of seats for a matinee. And for the evening shows, I'll do the conversion here. It was anywhere between $35 and $90, which seems about right for a first-rate play. Now, what did the critic of the Detroit Free Press have to say? He said, any one of the Marx Brothers could carry a show. Collectively, they are a riot. So they're booked for 1 week, but they're doing so well and they sell it out that they're going to play another week. And so from June 7th, 1925, the ad reads, second smash week. I'll Say She Is, those funny men from Broadway, same supporting cast. No, advertise that they're traveling with the same supporting cast that played in New York and in Chicago. They note that Marx Brothers are screamingly funny in a snappy show, and it really apparently was. Don't have any film of it. There's nothing in existence, but it played so well around the country that it would be fun if we had a script and someone could put that on again. But here's what we're here for. That ad informing the public that they were going to play a second week is accompanied by the craziest story that I've seen in a while. It says, the Detroit Free Press, L. Marx, and that's Leo or Chico, actor vanishes here. Comedian complains of illness, leaves without hat. Police hunt fails. And before we go into any of this, there's two articles here, and I have no idea whether this is tongue-in-cheek, whether it's real, whether the newspaper's in on it, whether it's a publicity stunt, or whether Chico's just nuts. Here we go. Leo Marx, one of the famous four Marx Brothers comedians who are appearing in I'll Say She Is at the Schubert Detroit Opera House, was reported to the police last night to be missing. He left the theater suddenly before the close of the show Saturday night and is not known to have been seen since, according to a report made by Julius Marx. Now, we're relying on Groucho Marx's tale, his testimony here, as it were, to tell us what actually happened. So good luck with that. A canvass of the city's hospitals was fruitless, so they're taking it that serious. Julius declared Leo had seemed worried recently, although he never confided with his brother. Julius said that he and Leo were solving a crossword puzzle in a dressing room Saturday night, waiting for the finale. Leo suddenly complained of not feeling well and left without his hat through the stage door. That was the last the brother has seen of it. So where did he go? They make the note that his automobile remained uncalled for and he had about $500 with him when he left the theater. Then it gives a description as if he actually is missing. The missing actor is 37 years old. His wife, who remained through Saturday night at the window of their hotel room, watching for his return, said he was in good health and their married life has been perfectly happy. Leo's 5'6", weighs 150 pounds, and has brown hair. He's slightly bald. When he left the theater, he was wearing a gray suit, and they're doing a citywide search. So that's Monday, June 8th. Wednesday, June 10th. In the Detroit Free Press. Missing actor found working crossword puzzle. Leo Marx to return from Cleveland to play rest of scheduled appearances. Leo Marx, musical comedy actor and one of the noted Marx Brothers who disappeared from the theater during a performance Saturday, may have been suffering from a crossword puzzle dementia, Julius Marx's brother asserted Tuesday. So Groucho says that his brother's got crossword puzzle dementia. One other theory, that he went to Cleveland in search of a parking space for his motor car, was advanced in explanation of the comedian's strange disappearance. He had experienced difficulty in this connection earlier in the day. Now, I don't think he drove 180 miles to get a parking spot, but it does seem like something Groucho would say. Shortly after this, Mrs. Marx had a long-distance conversation with her husband in which he said he would rejoin the troupe at once. His arrival is expected Wednesday morning. It's noted that Chico Marx is an out-and-out crossword fan. In his dressing room at the Schubert is a handsome, hand-bound crossword book at which he amuses himself between acts. One unusually difficult twister is believed responsible for the actor's disappearance. He had toiled at this, his brother said, throughout 27 performances without success. Shortly before he was discovered missing, he had been scouring Greek mythology for a king of Thebes in 5 letters. He failed in his quest, apparently, for the book was found open on his dresser, and the puzzle, like the real the puzzle, like the real reason for his disappearance, remained unsolved. Marx may have suffered temporary mental disorders as a combined result of the heat and his crossword aspirations, Julius said. Mrs. Marx said she believes her husband would be able to play the remainder of the performances this week. Did that happen? Did any of that happen? Leo or Chico, he was known as a gambler. He may have. There's many reasons why he may have scampered off to avoid bad humans. He could have been avoid debt. I don't think he was trying to solve a crossword puzzle, and I certainly don't think that he ended up in Cleveland trying to solve that puzzle. Now, after that play, the next big that the Marx Brothers got involved in was the Coconuts. Coconuts deals with the land boom in Florida, and specifically a hotel trying to be operated in the midst of this boom. It truly is funny. It was the first time most people saw the Marx Brothers. It was their first time on sound film, and it holds up well. I just watched it in the last couple of weeks. Now, the reason why it was funny is there was an actual land boom at the time. It was a huge thing in Florida. The prices of Florida real estate went through the roof. It's one of the first great bubbles in America. Now, we have some ads here just to give you an example of what was going on here from the Miami Herald. This is a company, the Wellington Real Estate Company, that says we can deliver the following choice acreages. Prices are only good for 1 week. Of course, in a boom, you got to get in quick, otherwise the prices are going to go up. But the amount of acreage is incredible. Liberty County, they have 98,000 acres. Dixie County, 225 acres. That's 351 square miles. That's the size of a normal county in a smaller state. They also talk about Walton and Bay County having 78,000 acres. And I'll read the ad. 18 miles of beautiful Gulf frontage. A wonderful buy at $12 an acre. Prices jump to $16 next week. Small binder of $10,000 required. So prices are going up, 78,000 acres. I looked at Walton County. At the time of this ad, Walton County had 12,000 people living in it. By 1970, they had 14,000 people. This is up in the Panhandle. You would have had to hold on to that property into the mid-1990s before demand would have overtaken supply. You would have had to hold on to this real estate investment for 70 years in order to even have any chance of making any money on it. You'd have been better off trying to bring deposit pop bottles, soda pop bottles across state lines like they did in Seinfeld, making money as opposed to trying to hang on to this long-term investment. But they weren't the only ones. There was advertisements here in the Miami Herald on June 2nd for Miami Shores. And look at the language that's being used here. You can't stop it. Then why not get in and go with it? Prosperity in the greater Miami district is an irresistible force. It has gained a momentum that cannot be stopped. It would be stopped, though. The next year, there'd be a terrible hurricane. Hurricane 1926 would decimate the beachfronts, decimate most of the developments here, and put a complete stop to the boom. But they didn't know that then. That's why they say here, and that is why Miami Shores, with its incomparable location, stands in a class all by itself and literally sells itself to intelligent and well-informed investors. Think it over and follow the lead of those who know when all went bankrupt. But the boom was going to continue for about another year after this ad. And so we've got the Edward R. Dammers Realty Corporation advertising. Well, this is different. He's advertising that at 8 o'clock on the major radio station the next day that Mr. Dammers is going to give a talk concerning real estate investment in the Miami area. So what it says here is whether you've bought a lot in the Miami district or central Miami, this will be of interest to you. Buy something in the Miami district if it is only a mud hole. The greatest chance of making money the world has ever known is in the Miami district, here and now. Of course it wasn't. Of course it was. But people want to believe. Now, on a much more relaxing note, 1925 was the year of the first national spelling bee in the history of the nation. Headline in the Houston Chronicle, and this is being told through a Houston perspective, June 18th, 1925. Kentucky boy wins national spelling test. Houston girl drops out on word skittish, while gladiolus proves last hurdle for winner. It's noted here that Houston's champion speller skidded on the word skittish in the 41st round of the National Championship Spelling Bee here Wednesday night. The Houston girl inserted a C when she should have used a K. A dozen rounds thereafter, Frank Newhouse of Louisville, Kentucky, successfully negotiated the word gladiolus and was crowned spelling champion of America. And get a load of this, handed $500 in gold, which went to the first prize winner. You got $500 in gold. That's not bad. That's, again, doing our calculations, he got like $15,000. That's pretty good for spelling gladiolus. Now, we promised you a little Charles Lindbergh, and we're going to give you about as little as Charles Lindbergh as we can. Charles Lindbergh, of course, in 2 years after this, 1927, would fly the Atlantic and land in Paris to universal acclaim. But why was he flying to Paris? And what was the impetus? Well, the impetus was Raymond Ortigue was a fellow who was born in France. He came over to America when he was 12 years old in 1882. When he was able to, he began working in restaurants and hotels. He worked his way up to become the maitre d' of a major establishment, and then he eventually purchased that establishment, and he'd go on to purchase several other hotels. He became a very wealthy man and a real figure in the community. He was a very generous man. And one of the things that he became fascinated with, though, and later in life, was air travel. World War I and the fighter pilots and all got his attention, and he proposed in 1919 a prize of $25,000 for the first person who could fly nonstop. Either way, you go Paris to New York or New York to Paris, but you had to go New York to Paris for $25,000. And that, in fact, was the prize that Charles Lindbergh was shooting for. Here we have the Brooklyn Daily Times of Tuesday, June 2nd, 1925. Ortigue renews prize for nonstop flight from New York to Paris. The Raymond Ortigue Prize of $25,000 offered to the aviator who first crosses the Atlantic in an airplane in a nonstop flight between Paris and New York has been formally extended for 5 years from June 1, 1925. The first 5 years had expired at the end of 1924, and so he posts the prize. And when Lindbergh would fly that route 2 years later, lo and behold, he would win the $25,000. Now, American Civil Liberties Union, don't get a lot of them in the news, but here they are. There's two cases going on right now in America where the ACLU has gotten involved. The headline here in the Miami Herald of June 1st, 1925 is Bible Law Under Fire, and it applies to both. One is in Delaware where they have the mandatory saying of the Lord's Prayer to start each school day. And the other is the Scopes monkey trial. Let's deal with the Delaware case first. Delaware's interesting here. Today we'd be talking about separation of church and state and that there shouldn't be any prayer in any school at any time. But that's not what they were arguing about in 1925. They were back looking at the actual Constitution, what it says. And the Constitution, it's not that you can't pray. It's that it's the establishment of a state religion. And what the particulars of this was that the Lord's Prayer, they required the King James version of the Lord's Prayer, which is the Protestant version of the Lord's Prayer. Catholics have a slightly different version. And what it is what the ACLU was about was that by demanding a specific version of a specific prayer, you are promoting that specific religion, that specific form of Protestantism, as opposed to all Christianity. The Jews got hardly any mention here at all, but there is some peripheral things saying it would make Jews uncomfortable. But the reality is that they were more worried about offending Catholics, who were made up about 35-40% of the population at the time. So we also have at the same time. Oh, wait a second here. Here's how. You ever wonder how they find how do they know about that there's an aggrieved person somewhere? Things like the ACLU actually go looking for, representative plaintiffs, I believe is the term. What they were talking about here with respect to the Delaware law, we're looking for a parent or a teacher who's willing to accept our legal and financial services in testing the Delaware law. Distinguished counsel have offered their services. By this test, we are hoping to render a real service to freedom of teaching and to religious freedom throughout the country, for we do not believe that the law will be sustained. So they actively advertise for their plaintiffs, and that's how they found Mr. Scopes, John Scopes. They referred to him as a professor, but he's a high school teacher. He never actively taught evolution, the best of his recollection, but he was chosen as a good-looking guy, simple-looking man, and as the representative plaintiff. Now, the Scopes monkey trial got a lot of press here, and here's the headline in the Miami Herald. Baseball field will be evolution trial scene. In the local baseball field covering a huge circus canvas to keep the blistering midsummer sun off the necks of 20,000 spectators, the trial to determine Tennessee's right to prohibit the teaching of evolution in its public schools will open July 10th. Something interesting about the Scopes monkey trial, it wasn't the teaching of evolution that was banned by the law. It was the teaching of evolution as it relates to humans. You could teach evolution in Tennessee. You could teach it with reference to every species, several million species that are in existence. You just couldn't teach it as it relates to humans, because they thought humans, when you talked about evolution with humans, it became a theological question, and the government shouldn't be in the business of theology. The theory was that because humans had souls, that it was different than other animals, and that's the angle that the law attempted to protect. That part of it is never really set out whenever you're reading an article or watching a documentary on the Scopes monkey trial. But it's really important because it gives you the mindset of the educators in Tennessee. They're not 100% anti-science. What they are is 100% theological, and so they didn't want that particular doctrine taught with respect to anything that would impact the theology that they were promoting. Now, we've got some bad weather in June of 1925. Monday, June 1, Houston Chronicle. Rio Grande at flood stage, still rising. From Rio Grande City, Texas. The Rio Grande has risen to 21 feet since Saturday morning, and reports have been received from Monterrey, Mexico, to expect a big rise from the San Juan. The first of the floodwaters from this stream were apparent in the swiftly moving current. All kinds of debris were being carried downstream, and spectators at Roma reported that part of a bridge floated past there. A good rain fell over Stark County Sunday, the first in this immediate vicinity in several months. It is predicted the river will go several feet higher yet as a result of the rain in this section. Flood stage was reached Saturday from noon, and floods continue in the upper river. Now, so we got floods in Texas, but we've got a heat wave in the Northeast. Houston Chronicle, June 2nd. Score die in heat wave and storms. Extreme weather from Atlantic to Rocky Mountains. Well, they got the term right. They jumped the global warming thing, went right to extreme weather. Well, they got extreme weather, but it's 1925. I'm not sure we're supposed to have extreme weather in 1925, but let's see what happened here. The next day, death toll due to storms and heat wave is mounting. A record-breaking heat wave in the east has claimed 12 lives in 2 days. Continued hot weather is expected for the next 48 hours. Then June 5th, the Houston Chronicle. Fatalities due to storms and heat reach 140. At least 140 persons have died throughout the country in the past few days due to the heat wave, drownings, and storms. A compilation today showed. So there were 140 people died as a result of the heat, floods, storms, everything except toads. Now, on Houston Chronicle, Saturday, June 6th, the next day, no relief from killing heat seen in North. Week's toll is placed at 238 victims. New York has 80 cases of prostration, so 80 casualties in New York alone, 238 people dead from the heat. Finally, on Monday, June 8th, backbone of great heat wave broken. But they note storms add to suffering in many sections. Fatality over Sunday, number 157. Hundreds of thousands flock to the beaches in the Northeast. And just as a kicker, because remember, we've got rain. When it rains, it pours. From the Houston Chronicle, Monday, June 8, Mexican flood takes lives of over 100 people. And it goes on to describe how torrential rains in the Veracruz region had led to flooding on 2 rivers whose names I can't pronounce, resulting in the deaths of over 100 people. Now, we're going to travel to the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Here's the Bradenton Herald, Wednesday, June 10th, 1925. Headline, Yankee Balloon may be winner of great race. Goodyear III will be so declared, it is thought. Wonderful showing. What they had was a hot air balloon race. And it was just to see how far you could take your hot air balloon before it would return to land. And they won with a range of 441 miles before it finally dropped into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, they almost got disqualified because they were assisted in getting their balloon out of the water, and apparently that violated the rules, but the promoter said, what the heck, somebody's got to win this mess, and so they won. And Goodyear was involved in ballooning blimps and dirigibles from the get-go. This is something I wouldn't have expected, but here it is, from the Akron Beacon Journal, June 9th, 1925. Headline is, must obtain added supplies of helium. Building of dirigible yachts by Goodyear depends on production of gas. Now, there's 2 things there. The gas, first off, they're running their blimps and everything right at that point in time on hydrogen, which they recognize as being dangerous. It's flammable. That's what happened to the Hindenburg. So they've got to get helium. Helium is a byproduct of natural gas. And the fields are all in Texas at that point in time. And the government has total control over helium because they think it has a military purpose and they want to have sufficient reserves. But listen to what they needed the helium for, okay? Akron's newest industry, the building of dirigible yachts of the type of that most recently constructed Pilgrim, smallest of its kind in the world, produced by the Goodyear Zeppelin Corporation, cannot develop to any great proportion unless the government provides a new supply of natural gas for Fort Worth, Texas, according to announcements by Goodyear officials. There's a couple other articles in here, and what Goodyear wanted to do, they were proposing dirigible or blimp yachts. Well, difference between a dirigible and a blimp has no internal shell. A blimp is a balloon with an attached gondola where the passengers are. A dirigible has a solid frame. It would probably most likely be done in aluminum for lightness, and that allows you to actually use the interior of the dirigible for sleeping quarters, for cargo. But it's a rigid aircraft as opposed to a blimp being just a blimp. Now, they were proposing building airship yachts. Just in that classic term, they were talking. The articles talk about having landing pads at every major country club, and that people would be touring the country in dirigible yachts the same way they might be doing it in Airstream motorhomes. It never happened. Nothing ever happened with that. But it doesn't mean it's a bad idea, because over the last few years, a similar thing has been proposed. There's a $1 billion yacht being proposed called the Colossia. It's going to be it says, will it ever get built? Probably not. A 347-foot long yacht, and it will have a 200-foot long dirigible on it, a blimp. So you can take your yacht. It's one of those explorer type yachts, those kind of things. You take your yacht down to the coast of Africa. Then you stop 15 miles off coast. Then you take your dirigible up. The dirigible has a range of 10,000 miles. It means you can go 5,000 miles out over the savannah, 100 feet in the air, and watch the wildebeests get eaten by the lions. You'll probably get shot out of the air by militants and the military. But other than that, it's an interesting idea for a wealthy eco warrior. It's the kind of thing that has no practical purpose, but sure would be a lot of fun if you had $1 billion that you didn't really need. Now, there's a guy out there floating around in the early 20th century called Francis Jenkins, and we're eventually going to do a full episode on Francis Jenkins. But what he is, he's one of the early pioneers of television and photography. And earlier here in March, we were talking about the great tornadoes and how they used the radio photography they used the photography over wires as opposed to radio to teleport photographs of the damage done by the tornado to both coasts all within 4 or 5 minutes. That we know that can be done. But he's actually proposing at this point in time that you can send color photographs. He's actually using the 3-color method where you tint one of the negatives red, one green, one blue. You combine the 3 and you get natural color. That's how most color film works. And he's saying that you can do that right now with today's technology and send photographs by radio waves. And using his other bit of technology, if you can reproduce that photograph 24 times a second, and he has the equipment that'll do that, you can in fact get moving pictures in color over the radio. And he's proposing all of this in 1925. Now, that wouldn't become a reality till the late 1940s. He was ahead of the game, but we'll keep our eye on Mr. Jenkins, or Professor Jenkins, because he's got some interesting ideas. Now, that brings us to our little episode through June of 1925, and we hope you enjoyed our little parlay here. Now, remember to like and subscribe. It's important that you subscribe. It's based on subscribers that we can expand our channel and do more good work here. When we next meet, it'll be on a specific topic. It'll be a biography one. We're thinking of you'll probably be looking at the biography of General Lew Wallace, the world's or America's most interesting man, America's Churchill. But hang in there, and we'll be back as soon as we get the next episode prepared. So take care and have a great day.